Hi everybody. How are you doing today? I hope you're having a good day and wish you well. And today we're going to have a lesson, and the title of the lesson is Yeast is Impotent by Itself. Reason I'm talking about this, one day I read an article on Facebook, and the author is a well-known writer and who also has a tendency to be kind of provocative in his teachings. And usually there are things which go beyond the scriptures, but this time he wrote something that he gets it right and makes a good point. He said that Christians need to be in the world even though they are to be separate from the world. And if we are to have influence on anyone, it is only going to happen out in the world. He said that the leaven does not work while it is in the packet. And that is true. You know, similar to the passage in Haggai, chapter 2, around verse 19, where God is talking about the fact that he asked the question, is the seed still in the barn? Well, for a farmer goes out and buys a whole bunch of seed and puts it in the barn, waiting till planting season. But when harvest time comes along, if the seed is still in the barn, what good has it done? It has done no good at all. It will not produce a crop. And so it either be good for the hogs or have to be thrown out because it got spoiled. And we can relate to this in many ways. I know years ago, my wife and I got a bread making machine. I mean, we thought it was neat. Her parents had one, and they made some really good bread. And so we said, okay, well, we'll get one too. So we did. And of course, we followed many recipes and different kinds of breads. A few times we forgot to put the yeast in, and the result was a disaster. If we'd done it enough, we probably could have made a walkway in the backyard. But anyone who bakes can tell you the importance of the yeast, also known as leaven. It is so very important. It's what makes these things rise. So it mixes in with the bread dough and interacts with the sugar that is in it, and it permeates in such a way that the bread dough rises and gives bread the texture that so many people enjoy in their wheat products. Also, the smell of yeast working is just amazing. We used to live not too far from a bread factory, and every night the yeast would be rising, and the smell would just be outstanding. So now, in many ways, the Christian is to become the leaven this world needs to turn around and serve God. See, Christ talked about leaven when he said, beware of the leaven of the Sadducees. And of course, the disciples weren't, what are you talking about? I mean, and Jesus said that basically, beware of the influence of the Sadducees, because they were teaching things that were not right, that God would not approve of. And so when people teach false doctrine, they're the type that we have to beware of. And so we'll say this also, that Christians have the ability to be a good influence, but far too often the potential for good is left in the packet, left in the jar, or left out of the mix. And in other words, we are fantastic Christians maybe when we go to church, but once we leave church, we keep everything bottled up or in the package or the case, and we don't do anything to affect anybody. So also we understand anyone who bakes can tell you that the yeast inside the packet has potential. Now by itself, it does nothing. But when it's put in and mixed in with the proper ingredients, it does good. You know, there's a lot of chemicals in this world that by themselves, they don't do anything. They're just benign. But then all of a sudden, you mix it with something else, and the reaction is just sometimes amazing. They make all sorts of things, put out nasty smells, and create other things that, and make other things that is not from their normal state. And so it's always fun to watch these science shows where they take different chemicals and show you what happens when you mix this with that. And you can do the same thing at home with certain things, like if you have baking soda, you mix that with vinegar and you get a reaction. And so there's different things even around the house that will react with something else and demonstrate a form of power. You know, you put some chemicals together, even a small amount, and the power behind it can be amazing. We've seen how they mix certain chemicals, and all of a sudden they're blowing things up with just a few drops. So we can understand that. We can understand how things interact with others. Now, it goes the same for Christians. See, we all have the potential, but we need to get it out there and expose it where it is needed in order for it to be effective. It's like the salt of the earth we're supposed to be. You know, a person who bakes knows that salt sprinkled around a dish of food is tastier than one without salt. But they also know that if the salt is just piled up in the corner of the dish, the majority of the meal will be bland and probably not very tasty, but the corner with the salt would be inedible. We couldn't stand it. And so we do that. We're not to keep the salt in the shaker or the box. Rather, it is to be sprinkled around. Just like the leaven is not supposed to be kept in the package, it needs to be spread around and interact with what's out there. Now, a lot of times, we might think of it this way. You find the best people on earth when you go to church. And these are some of the nicest people, some of the kindest people. They'll do things for you. But a lot of times, they leave their Christianity at the church, and they get out, and they don't affect anybody. We all should be able to affect others in our behavior and cause other people to look at us, and honestly, they should see Christ in us rather than foul language coming out of our mouth, rather than dressing like the world or acting like the world. They should see a difference in us. So we're talking about our influence. Our influence is to permeate around our world where we live. People are supposed to recognize us, and the moment they see us, what do they think? There's a churchgoer. There's someone who believes in God. And that's what they should see. Now, some of them will say, well, there's one of them fundamentalist, wacko religion people. Yeah, you're going to have people like that. But we understand that. But the Bible also tells us even just a little bit will do. And for, let's face it, a lot of people, doing just a little bit of Christianity out in public is a lot more than they have been doing. A lot of times they just leave their Christianity at the door of the church building and don't put it back on until they come back to church, whenever that may be. So the Bible does teach us just spread a little bit. You know, it's like the salt. It helps. When you just sprinkle salt on something, the whole dish tastes better. But if you try and pour it on, it's kind of distasteful. A lot of people feel that way about our religion. When we try and pour it on somebody, they get a distaste for it and they want us to get away from it. So just a little bit. That's all you need to do. Just drop a little bit of hint here and there in the community where you live. Let people know that you're a Christian and then behave like one. And whenever they see you, they'll think of you. And they'll also know that you represent the local church. And so that's another thing that ought to give us cause to think about, is the fact that every one of us who is a member of our congregation, we represent our congregation. And so what would the world think about your congregation if they based it all, if everybody was just like you? Sometimes that might sting a little bit to hear something like that. And hopefully it's said in such a way that it'll prompt you to make, well, you know what? I do need to be setting a better example. I do need to be watching my language when I'm out there. I need to be kind. And so that's what we need to do. And we'll talk about that in just a minute. So the kind of leaven that we need to spread towards those who are lost. You know, when we borrow from Colossians chapter 3, verses 12 through 14, we can see the qualities of the new man after we put away the man of sinfulness and put on the new man. We see some of these qualities that are supposed to be for those in Christ. He starts off like talking about having a heart of compassion. Yes, we do need to have a heart of compassion. We consider others in their plight and realize that they need help. So we have the heart of compassion. And then we add some kindness. Kindness goes a lot way in our world, even though there's some who just can't stand it. But for the most part, kindness is something that people appreciate. And then, yes, humility. Yeah, people don't like arrogance, but when you humble yourself, that doesn't mean that you're weak or anything. It's just you respect others and consider them as more important than yourself. You're going to be thinking about them and not the other way around. And then dealing with people in a gentle manner. Gentleness is something we're supposed to do. And you know what the scriptures say, a kind word turneth away wrath. And so if you speak harshly to someone, they're liable to turn around and cuss you out. But if we treat them in a gentle manner and let them know that we really care, and then there's time we just have to use a little patience. Now, some people, it may take a long time before they'll come to realize their need for God, but we just need to be out there offering our assistance where we can, and then using a little patience. And so we are to bear with one another. As we have new members come into the church, yeah, some of them, they bring some baggage with them, so we need to be patient with them and teach them along the way. We just don't let someone do things that are not right and not say anything. I mean, we have to bring that up. And then the next phrase is to forgive one another. Bear with one another and forgive one another. And so we must be willing to do that. And then, of course, to top it all off, we just add love, which is the perfect bond of unity. And that's from Colossians 3, verse 12 through 14. Now, love is also involved in the greatest and second commands. You know, Matthew 22, Jesus talked about it. And he said, upon these two rests the whole of God's law. And so we must be willing to help people get to heaven, and we can become effective in spreading the truth and the love of Christ in our world if we will apply these principles. So think about the leaven that you are spreading around. We leave a little bit of ourselves everywhere we go. You know, a person can walk just all over town, and then they give a hound dog your scent. He can follow your scent everywhere you've gone. And sometimes it's really amazing what those dogs can do and how they do it. Even if you cross your paths at some place, he can figure out which part is which. And so they're amazing creatures just by smell. And that tells us we leave something of ourselves around. Now, maybe it's dandruff, maybe it's hair falling out, the stuff we touch, the oils in our hands, but still, we leave a part of ourselves wherever we go. If we think of it that way, we need to leave a part of our Christian selves everywhere we go. And sooner or later, people are going to be able to track our faith simply by looking at us. We can be an example that someone will see and realize that if God is so important to this person, maybe it should be important to me. So think about the leaven that we use. And just a little bit is all that's necessary to do things. You know, a little leaven leavens a whole lump, and that's true. And so a little kindness can make a big difference in a room. A little gentleness can do the same thing. So keep these thoughts in mind and know that we are supposed to be, even though we are in the world, we don't have to be of the world. We need to be different. And the world needs to see that difference in us. So make it a point to make sure that you are different from the world. I mean, just be a good Christian. That's all you really need to do. You don't have to make a spectacle of yourself, but just be a good Christian. And that'll help the world see what is really important to the human soul. Consider these thoughts. Share it if you will. Share this message if you will. Others can probably benefit from hearing these words. And of course, check out my YouTube channel. This will be on there along with the other lessons that I've done. So I'm going to leave it for now. Wish y'all a good and blessed day. And hopefully we'll be back here tomorrow with another lesson. Bye-bye for now.